Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindi Bright. Welcome to HeartBeat. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to HeartBeat. I am your host, Cindi Bright. I'm so used to saying good evening, everybody. It's unusual for me to be on at 9 in the morning, but too big of a day, too big of history making that is occurring right now. And I thought it would be a good idea this morning where we get to hear from our own Washington State Chair of the Democratic Party to talk to us about this moment in history. And so very grateful that she is joining us this morning. I have just a few questions I wanted to ask her. If you want to ask any questions of her, if you are watching this live, please do so in the feed and I can show it to her so that we can get your questions answered. But without hesitation, I want to welcome in Shasti Conrad. She is the chair of the Washington State Democrats. She has been here before many times on the show. We are grateful to have you back, Shasti. Thank you for being here this morning with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, what a 24 hours has it been?
What a 24 hours. What has it been like for you? Like, I mean, you're in a seat of a front row seat of history as the chair. And talk to us about what you feel about this moment.
It's been absolutely incredible. You know, I think it really, yesterday I kept saying to people like happy American history. You know, it truly has felt like such a historic moment. And, you know, we were learning about all of this sort of in real time with everyone. We got a few minutes notice before the announcement came out publicly. And so like with everybody else, we were also processing and figuring out what our next steps were. But it's been overall, I would say, you know, people are just full of such gratitude for President Biden, for his, you know, service, but also for making a difficult decision, but making a decision that really, I believe, puts us in the best position to win in November. And then such excitement and energy and enthusiasm for the possibility of a Kamala Harris presidency and being able to elect the first woman of color as our president is just, it's so exciting. And people are, I'm just hearing, you know, so much just excitement around that.
That's awesome. That's where we wanted to have you on, just to kind of get a pulse on what's the broader world saying. Now, do you have any insight yet? I know it's a little premature and you can kind of see a lot of the speculation on national news, but any thoughts about who might be on the ticket with her? Any personal views or who you feel should be?
Well, look, I mean, I think we are in unprecedented times, and I love the idea of you know, continued diversity on the ticket. I just saw that Governor Gretchen Whitmer was on one of her calls with her team last night, and 2 women would be unbelievable. I think, you know, certainly as a party, we recognize that we do need to win in the battleground states. And, you know, I've also heard names like, you know, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. But, you know, I do believe that just like every other presidential nominee that we have had, that they should be able to make that decision about who their running mate should be, who they can work well with. And so I, you know, leave it in Vice President Harris's court and her team's court, but exciting to think about who else could be added to the ticket.
And kind of who decides who's qualified, right? That whole notion of, because we're all hearing, I mean, we all expected to hear it, the pushback with her being on the ticket. Um, and even from within the Democratic Party, the um, questions around whether we should have an open process or not, you know, what does that mean, and why is that kind of conversation even happening in the Democratic Party? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, Washington State Democrats, and myself as a spokesperson for our party, we were one of the first states to endorse Vice President Harris, and to encourage folks to support her. I felt very strongly that we needed to come out swiftly and very clearly about that support because, as you know, we both have seen the ways in which racism, sexism, that misogyny comes, and I just felt that we needed to build a big wall of support around her to make sure that we were standing up against all of that has been coming, that will only increase. And we know that it'll come from the Republican Party. That certainly is what has been a tenet of their party for many, many years. But unfortunately, I know that it'll also come from within our party, and that there will be, and there have been, these questions of, is she ready? Can she do it? Is the country ready for a woman of color to lead us? And I think many folks know that I'm the first woman of color to lead our Washington State Democratic Party. I'm first South Asian woman, yes, to lead a party for either party, a statewide party for either party in the entire country. And what I have found is that um, not only did I exceed expectations, but I have been able to build a bigger, coalition, bring more people in. The hardest obstacles were the doubts from other people.
Mhm.
It was the hand wringing, it was the can she, will she, all of that is what slowed us down and made it more challenging. And that was what I wanted to make sure we were protecting ourselves, and making sure we were standing up for the vice president in this moment.
Mhm.
And I should say that our Association of State Democratic Committees, which is made up of state party chairs and vice chairs and executive directors from across the entire country, we all endorsed Kamala Harris and moved forward. And so I think there's a real understanding in this moment that we need to be loud and proud
Mhm.
about our support for her.
Last night, you and I were chatting briefly before we went on air here. Last night, there was a big um, movement or conference of, um, Black women that joined. It was last number I heard was over 44,000
Mhm.
women. I was a part of that call and got to listen and hear say prayers for her. Like, but to watch the mobilization to get behind her, because to your point, we all know what she's getting ready to face, and the questions or the doubters, the people who, I talk about this in business all the time, the people who are the least qualified to make comments about another person's qualifications are the people that are loudest, right? What do they say? The weakest person in the room has the loudest voice. That's just kind of how that usually plays itself out. But I had wondered with her, she had even said, again, I know this is politics, but she said, I'm going to earn, I'm going to earn this. I'm going to, why does she feel, or I don't know if you can even answer it, like that she hasn't already earned it? Like she's been sitting in the seat. What do you think a statement like that is about from her?
I definitely have heard, calls of making sure that we are building legitimacy for her candidacy, and that, that there is a process in place so that it doesn't feel like, we're forcing her as the only option, and people want to feel like they've had a chance to weigh in. I do understand some of those feelings, but I would say, I trust President Biden's decision. He picked her as his running mate 4 years ago. He has served along, she has served alongside him. His accomplishments are her accomplishments, and he endorsed her. And we went through a presidential primary process earlier this year. 14 million Americans voted to support President Biden, and President Biden has made a tough decision, but he's also made the decision to support Vice President Harris. And I think we have to trust his judgment in that, and trust that this is who our nominee should be. But I agree. I think you're right. I think there is I'm not sure if that would happen if it was, somebody else that was the vice president. And I do think that there is a little bit of that, again, that concern of just making sure that folks get comfortable with the idea of a woman of color being in this seat.
Hmm. And that we can't get too complacent because we had all thought Hillary had won. And
Right,
so, right,
right,
so
right.
that not sitting still, I think, is an important takeaway also is
Yeah.
that we can't take for granted that she will assume that win that position. And speaking of that, I wanted to ask because the national convention is at the end of August, and
Mhm.
do the Washington delegates that have already been cast for Biden automatically go to her? Is that how that works?
Not at this moment. So, although President Biden did endorse Vice President Harris, he did not direct his delegates to support her. Which is it's there's a sort of technical way in which he does that. There's been a call for the open and transparent process. What we've seen is that there are several states who have already met with their delegations, and um, they've voted to pledge their delegates to Vice President Harris. North Carolina did that, South Carolina did that, and Tennessee did that yesterday. We did meet with our Washington national delegates last night, and we gave folks an opportunity to sort of process the news. And we had called everybody during the day as well. And what we were finding was that there was an overwhelming majority of folks who were ready to get on board and support Vice President Harris, but there are some folks who needed some time and wanted to make sure that they had, had a chance to hear feedback from the constituents in their districts who had elected them as representatives, as delegates. And so we are giving folks a couple of days to sort of settle into this news before we do anything formal in terms of a vote for endorsement or a vote to actually pledge all of us to Vice President Harris. But I will say that I think folks are feeling, again, that energy and excitement, and I think us as a Democratic Party recognize that we have a very short runway here, and
Mhm,
that we do not have time to waste, and that we
mhm,
need to make sure that we are moving swiftly to get behind our strongest candidate to be able to
mhm.
win in November.
We watch every week in the national news, we watch number 45. Um, he has stacked the courts. He's getting away with everything that's gone on around him. Do we need to be concerned at this point that there will be a legal challenge to her being stepping in since this is an unprecedented event that we've never really faced as a
Mhm.
country? Are the Dems concerned that we have any legal problems by transitioning this from Biden to Harris? Is there any risk that she would not be named the nominee? And if so, what would that do to the party for our election this year? I know these
Mhm.
are probably questions you may not have answers to, but I assume you might be subject to at least this kind of a conversation where it's being talked about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all knew from how the Republicans have been behaving these last several years and how they behaved in 2020 that we needed to make sure that we were airtight in how we moved forward, so that we could withstand any legal challenges, even when it was going to, likely be President Biden, who was going to be top of ticket. So I know. There has been some talk, and I know that folks are a little bit confused about this, but we typically the roll call where each state pledges their delegates happens during the convention in the physical place. So typically it would happen during that week in August when we're in Chicago. Because of a few states who had earlier deadlines for when we needed to have a nominee to be able to ensure that they were on the ballot. We have looks like we are possibly going to have a virtual roll call that will happen between August 1st and August 7th. That is
I see.
because, in particular, the state of Ohio has a deadline of August 7th to make it onto their ballot. Um, Washington State actually had a similar issue, which was that our deadline was before when it would have happened in Chicago. But because we have a Democratic Secretary of State, he was able to make an amendment and was able to say that he would accept the nominee if it happened, within that week. So we are doing everything we can to make sure that that our ballot access is set, that we can make sure that Vice President Kamala Harris can get on a ballot in all 50 states. And we're making sure that we have all of the legal backing that we need to withstand any challenges. But it's certainly something that everyone's keeping an eye on, and that each state is going through to make sure that we're fully set up and prepared.
When you were commenting a few minutes ago about when I asked you about the delegates, and you said there were some folks who were, I don't know that you used the word holding out, but pausing for, a couple days to meet with constituents. The Dems have been known to kind of eat their own. And so do we have to worry about internal sabotage towards her?
I would say I what I'm hearing is mostly excitement, like genuinely, and what I'm seeing in terms of our electeds of coming out in full support. Certainly behind closed doors, for the last we've been in this last couple of weeks where people have been trying to figure out how we were going to move forward. I think I've certainly heard comments around not being certain of her ability to win. And I think that a number of that has come from our sort of more donor class. And I think some of what we just saw in these last few weeks was that our donor class didn't feel like President Biden was going to be able to help us win. And so, some of that movement, I think, occurred, because it was coming from them. So I think, most of it is that we just need to again, I say, build that wall of support, and we just can't entertain it. I keep telling everyone, like, we cannot go through another 2-3 week cycle in the media where we're doing the will she, won't she, can she, will she, we cannot do that. We absolutely do not have time. And so we also, as Democrats, have to be quick and ready to call out that racism, that sexism, that, set of doubts, all of that. We have to call it out immediately. And we have to be comfortable to be able to have those hard conversations, to sit in that awkwardness at times with our friends, with people that we, that we love and know, and be able to say, like, hey, you wouldn't say that about, a white man. You wouldn't say that about, some other type of candidate. I will say that with the sort of talk of the last few weeks, I do believe most of it comes from a real desire to beat Trump. People were scared about our abilities to defeat MAGA, to beat Trump. And that is what I think people have just got to get on board, build the coalition, and trust that if we are all doing the work and we are not undercutting our candidate, we will win. But we just have to stop doing this, like, the Democrats are gonna lose. And
I saw one of our representatives, our U.S. representatives, make very open comments about Joe Biden. And even, I have such a thing about backstabbing, and how you have personally heard me talk about this a lot, about how people just harm each other. And, to your point, we don't have the luxury of that at this juncture. And nor do we even want to entertain qualifications. I mean, clearly, I mean, I'm not even going to defend that, justifying her qualifications for it. To the other issue, I agree with you about the media cycle. I'm going to hope that since DT is now the oldest person on the ticket, I hope that they run the next 3 weeks national news cycle highlighting his age and
yes.
his, being on stage with a Kotex on his ear. I'm being a little facetious, but
I mean, look, if you listen to that speech that he gave last week, you'd be like, is he fit for the
Mhm.
presidency? Is he sane?
Exactly,
How's his mental state? I mean, it's
exactly.
the double standard. I saw this morning too, that like, the fact that January 6th didn't move their party away from Donald Trump, but
Mhm,
our guy had a bad debate performance and it was
mhm,
enough for us to get here. And, it's just but again, I think it demonstrates that they are very much a cult.
mm,
They are other people ran in that primary and they all fell in line with Trump. And
mhm,
look, we are open for dissent. We are a place where we have discussion. Our party, we have discussion, we debate the issues. But in this moment, we really do need to come
mhm.
together and not waste any time here.
What do I'm going to speak from a little bit of my own personal ignorance. These internal or these polls that they talk about. Like last night, I was listening to, I was on CNN, and they had already this poll where they were saying that um, Joe Biden was 4 points behind, and now Kamala Harris is like 2 points behind. Like, how do they measure this? What are these polls, and how could they possibly have that kind of a pulse on it? I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but I think does the general public even know how they get that kind of information? Is it reliable information? Like,
There's so many different like polling firms and whatnot, and they all have their different methodologies. I mean, I always tell people get off the polar coaster. Like you just got to go talk to people. And I in 2022 they predicted that it was going to be this massive red wave, and that we were going to lose all these seats, and all, and it didn't happen. And I knew that it was not going to happen because I was out knocking doors, talking to people. And the Dobbs decision that year in 2022, people were so angry about losing rights, particularly women, that it was like there's no way that this is gonna, like, people are gonna stay quiet. And so with polls, it's like they have their ways. A lot of times they're polling older people because they'll use landline telephone numbers, so you're not getting a full scope of the diversity of a state, of a community, certainly of the country. Sometimes, like, I was watching the other day that CNN was doing this focus group with like voters in Wisconsin, and then they were doing one in Arizona, and they pick people who purposefully are not very well informed quite often, right? Because they say that they're not, they're independent, they're not one party or the other. And so sometimes it's helpful to just hear the feedback, but it's not fully reflective of the vast majority of folks. So again, I encourage people that the polls, take it with a grain of salt, and then just you got to do the work. We just have to get on these doors, talk to people. All of the data says that the best way to encourage people to get out and vote is to talk about why you vote. Why do you care about this? Why is this important to you? Having those stories of what is it that keeps you in this work and makes this so important for you, is just that's what does it. And so there's no other way around this. We just have to
mhm.
continue to do that.
Any to that point before I wrap up here, because I'm so grateful for your time this morning on a short notice. Um, any updates on this whole Project 2025 that the right is trying to push? Like, here, any update on that you want to share?
Project 2025 it's terrifying. It is a blueprint that the Heritage Foundation and the Republican Party has basically put together to say, Trump said, "I'm going to be a dictator on day one," and we have to trust him at his word. Project 2025 is exactly what they plan to do when they are able to take over the entire government, and it includes things like, a nationwide abortion ban, outlawing no fault divorce. Basically it's like Handmaid's Tale in writing, and we folks should read the cliff notes on it and look deeply at what is in there, and that'll send a chill down your spine, and that for me, that makes me go like, all right, let's get to work, because we cannot for a second let that come into play. It is terrifying stuff. And the Republican Party has shown us exactly the march towards authoritarianism that they are on, and that they will not wait. The thing about what they learned from 2016 and then in 2020 is that, not that, hey, maybe we need to slow our roll, or maybe we need to make sure that we're working with the other side. No, what they said is, we are going to just slash and burn, and we don't need to wait for anybody. We are going to do what we want to do, and that's what we're fighting against. We have to defeat their agenda, and make sure that we're building for a more positive future that includes all of us.
Mm-hmm. Shasti, lastly, what do we need to do here in Washington State to support this effort? And what do we need to do here to support you and your work as you're in the battlefield for the next few months to make this all happen? What do you need from us, I guess, is the question.
Thank you so much for that. Well, first of all, ballots have dropped for our own primary. We're just about 2.5 weeks away from, actually about 2 weeks away from our primary. We have incredible candidates that are running right here in Washington State, including for governor and for all of our statewide. Your state legislators are running. And so want to make sure that folks remember to get those ballots in. We do have on our website a list of endorsements from a lot of our different ally organizations, which I'm happy to share with you so that you can share with your audience. And then, certainly like help us volunteer, help us get out on these doors and make phone calls. There's a way to help for anybody. We can always use help with data entry if you don't like talking to people at the doors and whatnot. Just help us in any way you possibly can. Help us with some dollars if that's how you can help. I'll make sure you have those links as well. And then, nationally, certainly the battlegrounds, it really is going to come down to about 6 states, which in the national election, where it really is going to make the difference as to whether we have what I hope is a President Harris versus a Trump 2.0. And, I would say, if you can head to Nevada or Arizona in the coming fall for a weekend or something to help them, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, if you can get out to any of those states, help friends and family, certainly they would love the support, and it really can make a huge difference.
Shasti, thank you so much for coming on early this morning and giving us an update. We're going to stay very connected to you along this next few months, particularly to make sure we can get President Harris into office. So I appreciate that you took the time out of your schedule this morning to come on. To our viewers who came on this morning, thank you for joining us. Let's stay connected to Shasti. Let's donate money to these campaigns. Let's knock doors. Let's volunteer. It's all hands on deck. No time to waste. Have a good day.
That up in sacks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.